But that's why the ecosystem is important to us, and we think that ecosystem will fly. When you look at this XDS architecture or XDS model, that's an international standard that can be sold all over the world. So the issue is Connect, which manages it at a lower cost than other ways of managing that orchestration, can also go global. And that's our sense, is that Connect is really a global product, not a US one. Although I'm sure as we take this out, people will say, oh, that's US, we don't want to use it here. But that's the way it goes. So but the other is that we fit in this into our whole, what I call Oracle ecosystem, all the way from optimization of the hardware, optimization of the operating systems, optimization of the management of Zen and cloud management tools, and our, if we call health sciences, or we call the Connect fixed web service orchestration, then these people systems are adaptive web service orchestration that allows an organization to use these same web services in a customized way that meets their own business processes. So this is really a how do you say, that gateway is for the same orchestration is less than 10% of the cost of using adaptive orchestration tools to orchestrate it. So, it's the 80-20 rule. If 80% of your web service orchestration is happening rapidly and frequently, well, you might as well hard code it. But you certainly want to have some capability of doing adaptive web service orchestration to manage your business processes as they evolve and be able to respond to the changing environment. So that's where both of those fit together. So the sequence I mentioned, standards testing and open source is really the sequence of public development in health. So, standards, HL7, SNOMED, all those sorts of things. But not just those, the cross-industry standards like W3C, OASIS, et cetera. And then public software testing specifications, and internationally it's IHE, and in the US it's these new specifications produced by NIST. So they sit right next to the specifications for concrete, It's our specification organization, right? And in the US, and we have to get used to, in healthcare, coming under the same kind of NIST-type standards as the building industry and the railroad industry and all the other industries, telecom industry, et cetera. And then the open source part, which is what we're talking about today, is really taking those visions created within these standards organizations, et cetera, and now implementing them in real software. And that's the third leg of public, what I think of as public development. And you can't skip, you can't go right into open source and think that you're going to accomplish much in healthcare. You have to start with standards, making sure that you pass the tests, and then you can deliver your code, design your code, and deliver your code. So that's what I take my engineering staff through each time we do a release. Now we can get into, the individual components, and for example, what we call the policy engine is the Open SSO policy engine that we've now brought in. And so you've already got that policy, that XACML-based policy engine that holds the ontology for consent. For example, you've already got it. Now, we're using it too. It's the cornerstone right now of our consent policy. And being able to integrate that with the auditing server, what we call our auditing service, an IAG audit server, we call our health policy monitor. Why? Because you're monitoring the policy-based access consent, and that's all to do with the control of your information. So here we get into the XACML and the SAML and all those kinds of technologies that, again, are standards based at OASIS, a healthcare spin with the current flat file purpose for use, which is a consent ontology in a flat file rather than in a hierarchy. And then, of course, the open source code that executes on it. So again, that's the 3 stages of public development in health. The rest of this, and I want to leave a little time for questions. Oh, I wanted to move past this, all this, IHE and that kind of related stuff to opportunities for small IT business in healthcare. When you're dealing with standards-based and, say cloud computing, standards-based cloud computing infrastructure, and those web services are, hanging out in public, right? One of the ways that small businesses can get engaged is to create the code for the tablets, the iPads, and the, other kind of tablets that are being used for patient consents. To create the GUIs that are specialized for anesthesiology rather than for cardiology versus orthopedics versus internal medicine. I mean, right now, vendors don't have the, the ability. No single vendor has the ability to really do a great job doing usability for every single medical specialty, not to mention every single nursing specialty. And so there's a great opportunity in this standards-based cloud computing where somebody else is handling all the data handling to actually create small businesses that go out and meet the needs of your local community in healthcare. And that's part of our dream. It's kind of the universal client model, for healthcare. So the opportunities, of course, and a number of you are involved in supporting small businesses, but also incorporating open source software into proprietary software. Now, what does that mean? Because we always hear that open source, like Linux and Zen, can't be put into proprietary software. Well, that's because they have what's called a GPL license, and which makes it very dangerous for big companies to mix. We have to, when we delivered, for example, Linux and Connect together, we had to be very, very careful that we didn't mix the two, or Connect would all of a sudden get the Linux license, the GPL license. It's a very interesting dance that we have to do with GPL. On the other hand, nice licenses, vendor-friendly license, friendly to small business as well as big business, like BSD, which is the Berkeley Software Distribution open source license. That's great because you can take open source code and bring it into your product, differentiate your product, and it's kind of the honor system of whether you, contribute back to the community. And that's kind of the where we are right now is I've developed a good process for bringing it in the company, but now I have to work with the lawyers to, at my level of the company, not the infrastructure Linux level, to get it out of the company again, so that we can get it back to Connect. So that's my probably biggest task for this year. Direct Project, another opportunity for small business. Direct Project was designed to support small business. Actually, it supports small business much nicer than it supports enterprises. When you look at the Direct Project goals, it was to replace fax. Initially, now people have stretched it much beyond that goal, but and fax there's a lot of hassle factors for small business with fax, as well as big business, like big hospital systems. And of course, all the cost of dedicated lines, et cetera, misfiling. I just heard a story that from Georgia to Ohio, there was one of the providers in Georgia changed one number on their fax line, and that number got reassigned to Ohio, and all of a sudden, all kinds of radiology reports were showing up in this business's fax. So fax is a horrible, horrible, horrible system for security. and needs to be eliminated as soon as possible. So anything that you can do in that area to help eliminate fax is a good thing. Eliminate fax. They decided to use an older protocol called STMP, email, in other words, secure MIME for privacy. And for the enterprise, if we look at the enterprise, that's not a bad thing. Because the big enterprises want to get a reduction in fax labor costs as well. The issue is there's a whole lot of security risks when you start to give employees their own, private keys. Because imagine being able, how easy it is to ship data out of an enterprise to anywhere without the CIO or privacy officer knowing about it if the employee has encrypted it with their own private key, right? That's a huge liability. That's the same liability that caused the WikiLeaks issue, right? And so CIOs shouldn't do that. It's a different thing to be in a small physician office and say, okay, we're going to, have a private key and we're going to go this way. It's another thing to receive that from a big enterprise and be able to manage the risk. So, so part of what we're doing is adding this direct capability to these two products so that enterprises can participate safely in this direct-oriented kind of communication. And that's kind of an architecture diagram real quickly about how we manipulate. And I can go through that, but I'm getting late. So I want to just stop and ask some questions or answer some questions if there's just one or two, because I think we're ready for the next presentation.
The use case with direct, you talked about it pushing data. Can it pull data as well?
Direct is simply email. So to the extent that I don't think you can pull email from anybody who doesn't want to send it to you, right?
So it's just
Yeah.
push into the internet.
In fact, it's just email. That's all it is. It's email with an encrypted body, right? And so it's like, how do you say? There were all kinds of more modern options considered by the direct project and rejected in favor of the old email, old reliable. So I think it's as simple as that. How do you, now the complicated part is how do you find out the people's public keys of whom you want to send this email to? The issue is in order to send the email, you have to have the recipient's public key. And so a lot of the work around provider directories that Ankh is proposing is really, and what we called it in Oracle is public key directory. Because how do you make those public keys available to people who want to send you direct? Well, the enterprise, that could be 4,000 public keys, because those public keys have to be associated with an individual personal email address, not with all the email addresses in the domain. Not the way it works. So anything else? So I think that's. I know that a number of groups that have been working on Connect are also trying to implement and bring Connect direct protocols into their solution. And we probably did it one way, and the others are doing it another way. And I should mention that we took a lot of the direct code off the direct code site to do that too. So, I mean, we go on shopping trips now, open source shopping trips, and it's a whole different experience for a development team that's not used to it. Pardon? Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good.